Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello, everybody. My name is Min, and you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides, and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing Indigenous world. Today, we have a special guest speaker, Mr. Michael Cameron from Jarra Property. Michael, how are you?
Hi, Min. I'm well. How are you?
Good, mate. Good. Hey, it's been a long time waiting for this interview. It's been a year now, I think. I would love to introduce you to our listeners. We have a lot of people who listen to our podcast and a lot of people on our database as well who would love to consider something like this, but obviously it's not for the faint-hearted. Michael, who are you? What do you guys do over there in Perth at Jarra Property? And let's talk more about this product you got here, please.
Sure. So first of all, who we are. I'm a director at Jarra Property, which is primarily traditionally been a commercial property developer. We do a lot of childcare centres. We'd be one of the more active developers of childcare centres in Western Australia. We've been running for 6 years. Our model is very much tenant-driven. So what I mean by that is we work closely with tenants to roll out their growth strategy. So in the case of SDA and SIL providers, in the recent past, we have worked with a couple of SIL providers, but currently working with Identity WA, who's quite a large SIL provider in WA. They have circa 400 participants. Now, a lot of those participants are currently in government housing, and Identity WA has a housing strategy to relocate those participants into more contemporary, appropriate housing, namely SDA. And we are currently developing 16 houses with Identity WA, and it's very much a hand-in-glove relationship. They tell us where they want to be based on the participants that they have and are relocating, and we're finding property for them and developing the property. And then once it's developed, Identity WA itself, which is an agency of the Catholic Church, sign a head lease, and that they then place their participants in the property, and their participants can obviously much better care.
Wonderful. Before we go further, let's go back a little bit, please. Go back a little.
Sure.
When did you guys start to think about SDA? I mean, you guys were a property developer sort of fund kind of group, childcare, I assume other commercial properties as well. When in the last 5-6 years did you decide, well, maybe SDA is for us, and why divert to a different tangent? Give us the background story there, please.
Sure. So two things. One, the reason we're attracted to childcare is it's a positive amenity for the community. Now, SDA has a lot of similarities with childcare, I would say, going back to the early 2000s, namely that it is an industry that is early in its growth, in the growth cycle. There's a lot of opportunity for investors because of that. There's also a lot of risk for people who don't understand it. So we like the return profile, but more than that, there's plenty of places to get a good return. Much like childcare, it's a really positive amenity for the community and improves people's lives. Much like childcare, I mean, we developed a lot of fuel stations historically, and I don't get the same satisfaction from developing a service station as I do to childcare or SDA.
But when did you start thinking SDA, and when did you get into it?
Okay, good question. SDA, this is our fifth fund. Jarra 28 is our fifth SDA fund. So we've done 5 funds. We started looking at it in 2020. WA was a late adopter of SDA. They were 5 years behind the East Coast. And 2020, we had a bit of a look at it. We found it very difficult being commercial developers who place a lot of value on a lease to get our head around the management structure of SDA. So we were pretty cautious when we started in 2020. We developed our first project in 2022. And for the past couple of years, we've been working with tenants like Identity WA, helping them roll out their growth strategy.
That first project for SDA then, WA, where was it? What was built? And is it tenanted yet?
Good question. The first project that we built was in WA, Balga. It was a 12-month construction process. We now have it fully leased. That one we did as internally, just to understand SDA.
Was that a batch of villas or one house?
Villas. Got three villas, one house. Yeah. 2x1s, predominantly 2x1s, 3x1 at the front. It's now fully leased. It's under a management agreement structure, and it's doing well.
And may I ask, how long was it vacant for?
3 months.
Which is standard, obviously.
You're taking me back. It was about 3 months.
All good. Great. So obviously the history is there. You looked into it. You understand the sector. It's very similar to childcare. You guys have been in the property game for a while now as a fund manager, so to speak. Now, with this new release here of this new fund, tell us the name of the fund, the capital raise, what's been raised so far, what is the product, what's your projections and forecasts for this product, please? Tell us all about this product, please.
Sure. So Jarra Investment Trust 28 is the fund. We're raising $12 million to develop 16 houses across Perth. That's 8 different suburbs of varying demographic profiles ranging from within 5 kilometres of the city, all 3x3 houses, to within 15 kilometres of the city. We've currently secured 7 of the 8 properties. So there's 2 houses on each property. So we've secured 7 of the 8 properties. Perth residential market's been very strong, as I'm sure you're aware. It's grown 20% in the past 12 months and is forecast to outperform all other capital cities for the near term, next 3 years. So we've bought the properties well. We're forecasting 13% IRR, and we're pretty comfortable that with where the resi market is at. We haven't forecast any upside in the resi market, so we think there's a fair bit of upside there. That's our strategy. Now, the main differentiator with this fund versus a lot of other STFs.
Mate, what's the basic summary of this fund, please, from the fundamentals of what it is, how much you're raising, everything about it, please, for our listeners to understand.
Sure. So for our 5th fund, Jarra 28, we're developing 16 houses across Perth. They are all 3x3 houses. Now, the main differentiator with this fund versus other SDA products that I've seen, there are a few similar products, but I think the main differentiator for us is that we've got a 10-year head lease with Identity WA, which is an agency of the Catholic Church. So the covenant of the lease covenant is very strong. Now, 16 houses, all of them will be under a head lease. We're forecasting a 13% IRR to investors, all post fees. As you're aware, the WA property market has been very strong for the past 12 months, growing circa 20%. We have had these properties under contract for 6 months, so we've bought them very well. We see a fair bit of upside over the near term. The consensus view is that WA Resi is going to outperform all other capital cities, so we see a bit of upside in our forecast. We also, so key points are WA Resi, head lease with the Catholic Church, very strong lease covenant. I know a lot of products forecast higher returns than that, but there's no leasing. The leasing risk with this product is very different to a management agreement. For example, the tenant in this instance takes on the leasing risk.
Please explain to our listeners, what does a 13% IRR mean?
It's a good question, Mick. So 13% IRR is total return. So that's consists of income and capital gain. We're forecasting it's a 5-year fund. We're forecasting a 10% distribution to investors in the initial years, which increases up to close to 15% in the latter years. So the 13% IRR consists of circa 10% distributions plus 3% capital growth every year, which we think is conservative on the basis of WA Resi is expected to outperform all other capital cities.
In your experience with other competitive products, how do they go with their marketing and their forecasts? You say yours is conservative, 10 plus maybe 3% capital growth, maybe. How do other groups out there around Australia, in similar boats like you as a commercial developer, fund manager, so to speak, asset manager, how do they go with their predictions and forecasts?
You've seen probably as many of these as I have, Ming, but one thing that I have seen as a constant with a lot of the management agreement style funds is they just assume their headline number assumes full occupancy. So you may see rates of high teens. Some of them I've even seen 20%. Now, most of the time, a lot of those products have been, there's actually been quite a lot in WA from East Coast fund managers, interesting enough. And a lot of the locations which I've seen are right out in the mortgage belt, property that's very cheap. It has very strong yield, but given the additional capex that's required to build SDA, as we all know, they're often overcapitalized. So it may look really good on from a yield perspective, but there's significant overcapitalization in the asset and also the investors taking on the leasing risk. I think the other thing to take note of, and this is somewhat self-serving, but we're specialist WA developers. We know this market very well. We have looked at going over east. In fact, we set a business up over there and decided that we didn't know the market well enough, so came back. A lot of these, we know the builder that we're using. They've delivered 4 funds for us previously. The construction timeframes are they've delivered the past 4 funds within 12 months. If we were going to the East Coast, it would be very difficult for us to get comfort on construction timeframes, the right builder, all those elements that are so important to making the forecast that we make actually come to life.
Very good points, Michael. I think being on the ground, boots on the ground is a big difference as a fund manager representative of client investments. Number one, yes. I think the fact that you guys actually have a head lease with a large entity in WA, being SDA, Catholic Church there, is a good positive because the other funds, as you say, their forecast assumes full vacancy, whereas you guys have already got that taken out, removed, because it is under a head lease with the Catholic Church. Yeah. And the other thing is you're in the inner city, 5-kilometre radius. Those are the ones out there further out, the cheaper areas. Michael, what's the LVR, capital cash raise versus debt leverage in the fund that you're going out for this 16-house syndicate, please?
The fund will be structured with a 45% LVR, which in nominal terms is 12 million of equity that we're raising and a further 12.5 million of debt. We forecast that at completion, the fund will be worth 30 million. So that when I say the 45% LVR, it's roughly 50-50 in terms of debt and equity, but in terms of value, it's about 45%.
When you say 30 million gross realisation value at completion, or is that like of the cost?
No, gross realisation value. Yeah, that's what the...
So in terms of cash contributed and the leverage debt in there, was it 12 million cash raised and leverage amount of?
12.5. So 24.5 of capital for a portfolio at the end that will be worth circa 30 million.
Yep, wonderful. That's a pretty good deal there.
Yeah, I think that sort of headline numbers in our forecast are plus 20%. So from an investor's perspective, during development, they would expect to get plus 20% uplift in their units and then plus 10% distributions thereafter. Obviously, that's based on a forecast, but given the fundamentals of this fund, WA Resi, at least with the Catholic Church, I think it's nationally a unique product for that reason. I think it's a great opportunity. I think the other thing is we've been working on this since November, so we've got a running start. We've already settled one of the properties. We're settling another one this week and then another one next week, another 2 settlements in start of August. So we're very well progressed.
So, Michael, what is the minimum capital investment that an investor can do, number one? And number two, is a sophisticated investor requirement needed to go into this?
So minimum investment in the fund is 200,000 and the offer is available to wholesale clients, which is defined as we need an accountant certificate, but a wholesale client is defined as a minimum of $250,000 a year of earnings or $2.5 million of assets.
Wonderful. Now, you said 7 houses secured of the 8. When do you think you will be set securing all 8 and then starting site works on the project?
So keep in mind that they're 8 separate land parcels, of which 2 houses, 1 land parcel will have 2 houses side by side. So it's an iterative process. So for the one that we've already settled, that's in for DA. We're already we're in sort of the last stages of finalising the build contract. We'll start demo, I think, in August or September. So when I say we've got one left to secure, it's not that work stopped. We're very much moving forward with the 7 we've got. We just need to find one more parcel of land that is appropriate for Identity WA, which we think we'll have in the next month or so. So, yeah, we've got 7 secured that we're working on, and we'll have agreements for lease signed prior to introducing them to the fund, which I think is an important point, which goes back to leasing risk. And then we will need to
So these 8 parcels of land are not side by side. They are within the 5-kilometre radius. Is that right?
Just to be clear, so they're within. All of them are within circa 15-kilometre radius of the city, but the closest the closest property is well within. I think it's about 2 k's from the city. So yeah, they're all over the city and various demographics and price points.
Are they all low sets?
Sorry, what do you mean by low sets?
Low set, high set houses? Low sets?
As in single story? They're all single story, 3x3s, yeah.
Oh, great. Are they 3-bed, 3-bath, 2-car garage specifications with 2 living areas or 1 living area?
1 living area.
And the tenants they are looking at putting into these, are they mostly FAs and HPSs or ILs as well?
So we're building these to FA specification, and the tenants are mostly IL. And with the lease allows for, if they then go up to FA, then the lease adjusts for that. But most of the tenants are IL.
That's good news.
In our experience, one thing we've found with HPS is going back to that IRR equation before, income and capital gain, particularly in Perth, where relative to other capital cities, the land is quite cheap, even 5 kilometres from the city. It's very easy to overcapitalise. And high physical support makes it that even more of an issue. So the equation works better for those lower categories like FA.
Great. With all your dealings with investors the last 6 months, what have been the top 3 common questions that they ask you guys before they invest money into your fund?
First question is construction costs. Have we got a good handle on construction costs? And my answer to that is we have had the houses priced by 3 separate builders, all of which we have developed with before, whether it be childcare centres or SDA. Our preferred builder, we've got 2 preferred builders. One of them has built all our SDA projects, and the other one has developed numerous childcare centres for us. The other one is, have we got the land and have we overpaid for the land? Because it's a lot of the local investors here appreciate that it's a very tight market at the moment. The average days on market is 6 or 7, I believe. So it's very hard to get land without overpaying. We've secured most of these lots in first quarter of this year, and they're all around market value. So we've got a good handle on construction costs, all around market value for the land. And then the other key question I would say is timeframes. How confident are we in the timeframes? Again, going back to construction, the construction industry here is very strained. We've built the past 4 funds, we've all built under 12 months, and we know the builders that we're using, and they're fit for purpose. They've built a lot of this in the past. So I'd say they're the 3 main, putting me on the spot a bit here, but I'd say they're the 3 main ones.
What kind of time frame do you see the capital being deployed? So when will it all go out? When will it be finished and settled, handed over? What do you predict to be the final date of completion for all of the fund? 12 months from now, 15 months from now? What do you think?
So I would say 15 months from settlement, we'd expect the lease to commence. And our last settlement is likely to be January of next year. I'll have to check our model with exactly when that goes to, but that's January, February, March, April, May 26. But the first house will be delivered in, I would say, September next year, and then it'll be, a staged process. We're doing about 1 a month from then, or a couple of months from then.
Well, that's great. So the model works, the formula works, the relationship is strong. Do you see you guys releasing more funds to the market with Identity, given that there's 400 participants in there, or which all of them are SDA, but do you see yourself doing more funds like this in Perth?
Potentially. I think, as I said at the start, we're very much a tenant-driven business. So we would be open to working with other tenants in the same capacity. or Identity WA if they have additional tenants to relocate. We're concentrated on getting this done now, both for our tenant, our client, and also for our investors, because it's a pretty big undertaking, 16 houses for a team. We're a team of 4, and we just want to make sure we deliver on for both our investors and our tenants. But once we get this fund underway, as in construction, then we would definitely be open to doing more.
Are there any restrictions with FIRB investors for you at all?
There are restrictions with FIRB, mostly around, because it's residential land. There are restrictions around FIRB. Commercial is not such a big deal, but with residential land, there's the foreign buyers duty, obviously, that has to be considered.
Cool, nice, mate. Any final words of advice from you guys in terms of how you consider this product as a medium risk, low risk, high risk? I mean, I see it as a low risk investment because you've de-risked it, secured the land, secured the tenant, head lease. The numbers are all there. I mean, I think it's a low risk investment for the wholesale investor. How do you see this product to the market? I know what it is, but in your view?
It's a good question. I mean, nothing's without risk. There's it's in this space. I think it is one of the way it's structured, it protects investors. There's 3 main risks with this type of development. There's financing risk, leasing risk, and development risk. So if we start with development risk, as I mentioned, we've been working on this since November 23. We've secured the land. We've got a good handle on construction costs with 3 different builders. We're well progressed with the DA process. All of the land parcels are compliant, which in we're not trying to push the developments to something that's going to be troublesome for the DA. So I'd say development risk is Jarra's de-risking that before we introduce it to the fund. The next risk, leasing risk. Unlike a management agreement, Identity WA is responsible for finding the participants. They already have them. They're just relocating 48 people from government housing into these new dwellings. The lease is also structured so that lease payments are made based on the maximum number of participants that can go in the houses as opposed to the number of people that are in there. So compare that to a management agreement where investors only get paid rent when a participant is in the house. And then financing risk, 45% LVR compared to our commercial developments, for example, which we might do at 55 or, depending on the structure, sometimes a little bit more. So I think we've been pretty liberal with that as well. So, I mean, our business model is about taking the time to de-risk these projects for investors prior to introducing them prior to releasing an IM. And I think we've done that as best as we can.
You mentioned the word DA. Does that mean there's 8 DAs?
8 DAs, yep.
How many approved so far?
So far, I believe the first one, 0 have been approved. First one will be approved next week.
Okay. So are they'll all start coming through the next 2 months, I assume?
Yeah, so as the DAs pop out, we'll start demolishing the existing dwellings and start the construction from there on.
That's awesome. I don't see that many, I don't hear of many knockdown rebuild projects happening around Perth. They're all happening pretty much in the newer estates and the outer areas, as you keep on saying, and what you guys do are pretty stand out. You guys stand out. I really like what you guys are doing. You've been very slow in your rollout of the product. You've been very methodical in how you guys acquire assets and sites and go to market. So kudos to you guys. How big is the team there in your operation? How many staff?
We've got four in the office. We also have our project manager, who's my business partner's brother-in-law, actually. He sits in the office with us and his partner. So there's 4 in our team, plus 2 project managers who are consultants. And then we also have a number of staff offshore. So we've got 2 staff offshore as well.
Mate, thank you. Now, I really appreciate the time today for the podcast. I hope that anyone who is listening to this episode gets a better grasp for how a IM fund manager approach could be more beneficial to the investment, because a lot of people out there have money but have no expertise or experience to go to this kind of area. And sometimes it pays to be part of a syndicate. I call it a syndicate, that's what it is, an IM syndicate, professionally run and managed by an organisation like you guys who know what you're doing and have de-risked the investment, because the biggest risk out there is tenancy and debt and market timing, I guess. And you guys are have come. Well, the Perth market has come to the party late, but it also gives opportunity for investors under your banner through a syndicate to jump in and take advantage of the uplift as well moving forwards. Because as everyone knows, you should know, the Perth market is picking up and going to be well in the next few years. Yes.
Yep. I think we've got some of our investors are people who own SDA properties in their own right, and they just want a bit of diversification across a few different sites as opposed to having one dwelling or two dwellings. They get exposure to 16, as you say, with the benefit of having us roll it out for them.
One last question, Michael. So the IRR 13% assumes pretty much all of them are IL, improvability. It is FA category. As we see more and more participants in the fund go to FA status, if they do, does that mean the IRR will increase in time as well?
It does. I wouldn't say that is that is correct. It will, but I'd say that the main drivers where I see the fund overperforming potentially is WA residential market, which is forecast to grow. Time will tell. There is potential to introduce a little bit more leverage, so we can go to 55% LVR once they're built, which would improve the returns to investors. We would only do that once the assets were stabilised, as in once Identity WA was paying rent. There's also, we've priced the exit, the sale of these assets, as if they are management agreement. We haven't assumed that there's any value attributed to the Identity WA lease, so we see a fair bit of upside there potentially. And they're really so WA Resi, potential to increase leverage to be determined. And I think there's a lot more value in the Identity WA lease than for a management agreement product.
Fantastic, Mr. Cameron. I want to ask you one last question, which I'm sure everyone's asking. Mr. Michael Cameron, how much money you got in the fund?
Great question. So there's two parts to that. So in terms of dollars in units, Jarra is a $500,000 investor. In terms of work to date, we're considerably more. We've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars on top of that just to get it to where it is. I don't know the exact figure, but it would be close to double that. So in terms of units in the fund, we're $500,000, but we're funding everything until we get investors in as well.
Michael, if any of our listeners or investors want to talk to you one-on-one, can we organise one-on-ones with you with video calls? Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
Awesome. There it is, folks. We'll put the website link of Jarra to our podcast episode. We will have the IM as well internally. So if you want to contact myself or the team in our office, please email us at info@endurance.property and we will send you the IM for Jarra Property Trust number 28. And if you think that's something of interest to you and you qualify, we'll happily organise a one-on-one Zoom call with Michael Cameron from Jarra in Perth to see whether you want to take next steps to investing in here. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And I will talk to you offline after this. Bye-bye, mate.
Thanks, Ming. Really appreciate it. Great to chat.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.